So what block are we going to do this time? I don't know. But let's get started anyway. Okay, so what was that introduction all about? Well, sometimes in quilting, the same block can have multiple different names. It all just depends on who you ask. Now, I know for a fact that some people call the churn dash, well, I call it a churn dash, but some people, they might call it a monkey wrench. So when I was doing some research about this particular block, well, I found about 10 different names for the same block. Some people call this the string of diamonds. Some people call this the star string. Some people call this the, what was the other one? Diamond of strings, string of diamonds, kind of similar. But there's all sorts of different names for this particular block, so I don't know what the official name of it is. So for purposes of this video, I'm just going to call it diamond strings because, well, you use strings to create a diamond shape. The block initially will look like a star. Henceforth, I can understand why some people call this the star string. But the secondary block, if you make a whole quilt out of this, and I'll probably show you some pictures just as an example, it'll actually create a diamond. Well, with that said, let's get started with this block. So let's have a look at the fabrics that we're going to need to make this block. First and foremost, we're going to be using strings again. So I kind of dug into my string bin and I pulled out all these strips. Now, some of these strips, they're strips of various widths and sizes and lengths. I would suggest that you go with the strip that's not wider than 1.5 inches. Of course, you can do whatever you want on this, but I'm choosing to go with strips that are no bigger than 1.5. So like this is probably 2.5 inches. So I'm going to end up trimming this down, but we'll see how it goes. I got all these strings and I got more of them in this bin. So kind of an endless supply for this block. You've seen me do this in previous videos. Again, in the last video, I kind of mentioned that I'm playing around with what I can do with these, calling it crumb tape. Basically, I'm sewing a bunch of crumbs onto some adding machine tape here, and it kind of creates like a strip of crumbs. And so that's what I have here. And I'm going to insert it somewhere into this block and just use this up to see what it looks like. I think it just gives a little bit of variety in terms of not just seeing strings. You can kind of see a strip of crumbs like this. Makes it a little bit more interesting in my opinion. You're also going to need a type of foundation. Now, I'm going to use two different types here. This is just a 6.5 inch square of just white fabric. You could also use 6.5 inches. This is just newspaper that you normally see me sew strings on. On one version, I'm going to use the fabric, but on a separate version, I'm going to use the newspaper. You can choose what type of foundation that you want to use, regardless whether it's the newspaper or if you just have some kind of fabric on hand that you just want to use up. You can use a muslin. You can just use, I'm just using again a plain white fabric here. But regardless of whether or not you use the newspaper or fabric, cut it to 6.5 inches and cut 4 of them. Okay, so I got 4 of the fabric squares and 4 pieces of the newspaper. That's pretty much it. So let's get this block started. First, we need to do some markings. Here you see me putting a mark 2 inches inward from the bottom left corner. Then I'll rotate the square so that the same bottom left corner is now in the upper left corner. And we'll make another 2-inch mark inward. Then from those markings, I draw a diagonal line towards the opposite corner. This will create a shape that looks like a kite. Repeat these steps on all 4 background squares. Take one of your strips or strings and lay it right sides together with the background. Line up the edge of the strip or string to the diagonal marking you just made. Notice that I am putting the strip over the kite shape. This is because we will stitch it down, then flip it back. And so we stitch it down. Then finger press or use some other tool you have on hand to press the strip back. You can iron it if you prefer. And repeat on the other side. Keep adding strips until the background is fully covered, well, with the exception of the kite shape in the middle. If you have crumb tape and would like to use it, you can substitute it for one of the strips, just like how I am doing here. When the block is covered with strips, give the block a good press with the iron. And then we trim. Use the background fabric as your template and trim off any excess. This would be a good time to get out your rotating mat if you have one. And repeat on all 4 background squares. So I got the first version of this block, and let's have a look at this and let me point some things out to you. One thing I do want to point out is that in the 4 corners, I actually didn't make the point go all the way out to the corner. I kind of cheated a little bit. So it's kind of what you would call a floating corner, where it doesn't really go all the way out to the edges here or even here. But there is one area where the point kind of does matter, and it's actually at these inner points here. This is where you want to make sure that when the 2 seams come together, that point is pretty spot on. These are not perfect, but they're close enough for me. So if you are someone who is going to stress out over matching points, pay attention to these guys here. Okay. But again, the block design, the corners, you don't have to worry about because they kind of float around. They don't go all the way out to the edge there. So because these seams there's a lot of pieces that are kind of coming into the seam allowance here. So you probably should consider pressing your seams open like how I did here. It's gonna be, it's not gonna be 100% flat, but at least it spreads out the bulk a little better. Of course, you can choose to press your seam allowances over to one side, but just imagine you're gonna have a whole ton of bulk there, and well, you might have problems with the quilting, or your long armor might not appreciate you for that. So I would highly, highly recommend that you just press your seams open. All right, so we got this version of the block where I used a 6.5-inch background fabric. But now in the next version, we're actually going to use a paper foundation. So let's get started with that. If you enjoy foundation paper piecing, you might like this construction method since it's a very similar technique. Just like how we did with the fabric foundation or the first version, you will mark 2 inches from one of the corners. Then draw that diagonal line from your markings to the opposite corner, creating that kite shape. And fold the paper on those lines. Or, instead of drawing the line, you could skip that step by using a ruler and scoring the paper, then folding the paper into that kite shape. Now, this is where the paper piecing similarity comes in. Cut a 4-inch strip of your background fabric, then place it over that kite shape. Make sure that the right side of the fabric is facing up. you may want to pin the fabric to the paper to keep it in place. Then turn it over to the opposite side, fold the side flaps over, and trim the fabric a 1/4 inch from the folded edge of the paper. Repeat on the opposite side. Again, if you're familiar with paper piecing, this will be no problem for you. Now turn it back over so that the fabric is face up and start adding your strips. Make sure that you align the edge of the strip to the diagonal edge of the background fabric that you just trimmed. Now one thing to note, notice that I unfolded the paper to put it back to its original square shape. You can keep those flaps folded and out of the way so that you're not sewing onto the paper. But I chose to unfold those flaps and use them as a guide for a few reasons. Number one, I need to know if my strip is long enough. And number two, I'll know when I have sewn enough strips on both ends to make a 6.5 inch square. Now in the end, the paper will be removed, so you could keep the flaps folded or unfold them. That choice is yours. When you have sewn enough strips to all 4 squares, trim it down to a 6.5 inch square. Now before you sew the squares together to create the block, you will want to remove all of that paper. And just like with the fabric foundation or the first version, you might want to consider pressing your seams open. I got to thinking about this question because I never really asked you all of this throughout this whole series. And that question is, how do you like to use your scraps? Do you like to make string blocks, or do you like to sew crumbs together? Do you like to do applique work with them? Or is there a certain block that you always do when you have crumbs? Now, I have my favorites. I'm just curious, what are yours? When I thought about this series, I always hear that people have tons of scraps. They have scraps that could last them 42 lifetimes, or they even have fabric that could last them 5 generations. I'm kind of in that category, a little bit. But people are always asking, or people are always looking for different ideas as to how to use their scraps, their strings, their crumbs, and well, part of the reason why I wanted to do this particular series was because, well, let's think of different ideas as to how we can use all of these things. And I hope throughout this whole year you got some great ideas on how to use all of your fabric scraps. Well, I guess the series of questions that I really do have for everyone is, first of all, did you enjoy this series? We're not done yet. We've still got a few more blocks to do. What was your favorite block, or what is your favorite block when it comes to using up your scraps? Do you have a go-to? I sure do. Did you learn something new throughout this whole series? Some people have actually commented that, well, they didn't think about using their scraps in certain ways. Case in point, not everyone thought about using their crumb blocks as applique, and they learned something new. Because we're heading towards the end of the year, I've been kind of thinking, well, what's next? Because we've done 52 blocks in 52 weeks. I've done that. I don't know if I'm going to do that again, but, well, I'll never say never. And now we did this whole scrap series. What's next? I'll let you know. But if you got suggestions as to what we could do or what kind of quilt along you would want to see, well, put a comment down below. Let me know. Now, I make no promises that we're going to do whatever you do suggest, but I just want to know what you guys want to see in the future towards 2024 on this channel. Do you want to do another quilt along? Would you want to see more lives? Should we do more crafting projects, or should we just keep doing what I've been doing? Let me know. Now also, I've been thinking about what are my goals towards next year, 2024. Goals personally, career-wise, even goals for this channel. Quilting goals, crafting goals, just thinking about what I really want to accomplish in 2024. Now, one of the things that I do have on my bucket list is, well, I got a lot of works in progress, and they're all lying around in this quilting room somewhere over there, over there, over there, and some down there. Yeah, it's all over the place. So I think what I want to do in 2024 is concentrate on getting these works in progress done. I need to downsize that list somehow. Maybe I should actually get a specific number of these works in progress done. Progress. Is that even a word? You know what I mean. Now, this is not an excuse, but sometimes my schedule can just be unpredictable, so sometimes I just don't even have time to sit behind the sewing machine and get things done. Where there's a will, there's a way. Maybe I should say I'm going to get 12 of these works in progresses done. I can't say that word to save my life. I'll get 12 of them done in 2024, and I'm going to start soon. Yeah. And don't worry, I'm going to take you guys along for the journey. You can be sure of that. What are your goals, though? Both quilting-wise, maybe personally if you don't mind sharing. Career-wise, what are your goals towards 2024 that you want to accomplish by the end of 2024? Put that in the comment below, and maybe we can all somehow find a way to support each other through these goals. That'll be helpful, don't you think? I started something a couple of years back, and it was a way to campaign or motivate yourself to accomplish one goal a month. Maybe we should look at that again. Stay tuned if that's going to happen. 2023 was a great year for me personally. I mean, there was a lot of struggles. There was a lot of growing pains. 2024, looking forward to it. It's not quite a wrap yet, but I'm going to say it's a wrap. We still got a couple of weeks of 2023, but in my mind, I'm already moved on to 2024. Well, I guess my theme for this Sewing Side Chat is to look towards the future. So what do you see in your future? Sure. What do you see in terms of your goals or whatever you want to accomplish? And what have you accomplished in 2023? Put all of that in the comments down below. Let's all share and, well, let's encourage each other in 2024. All right, so I got both versions of the blocks done. You really can't tell the difference between the two, but let's have a look at all of this. I have both versions of the block done, so let's take a final look at both of these. So on this first block, this is the method in which I actually used the fabric as a foundation. Now, one thing I do notice about this particular version is that, well, because it's fabric, it sort of stabilized the block a lot better. There's not much give or not much stretch to it because, again, the fabric, well, it acts like a foundation or a stabilizer. Now, this version of the block is the one in which I took I used the newspaper, but what I did notice is that this has a lot of stretch to it. So there was a lot of, when I was actually sewing all of these strips on and creating the block, well, there's a lot of movement of the fabric, and I'm not even sure if this measures accurately 12.5 inches. And the other thing is, because it's stretched out, if you look at this edge right here, it's not exactly straight. I mean, there are parts where, especially in the middle, it really got stretched out. So Before I actually put this block into the actual quilt top, I'm probably going to have to end up squaring this or making the edges straight. So just keep that in mind. Both will result in the same looking block, but the construction of it is quite different. You can play with your layout. I mean, if you want it so that your points come inward, you can do that. I just made it so that the center is actually at the widest part there. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this video, I called this block the string of diamonds, or diamond string, I should say. What was it, string of diamonds or diamond string? I think it was diamond string. Anyway, the name comes because of this. When you put these two blocks together, you get this secondary block that's the diamond. If you were to put a sashing there, then of course you break the diamond up, but if you just sew the blocks together like that, you get this diamond shape as a secondary block. Henceforth the name diamond strings. Now, again, there's various names for this particular block, and you can search for it, you can Google it, you can look on YouTube. There's a lot of people that have constructed this block, but they give it a different name. And honestly, I don't know what the official name of this block is, so I'm just calling this diamond string. But you know, this is this is becoming one of my favorite blocks to do using strings. Now that I've actually constructed these two blocks, well, I might want to make a whole quilt out of this, but we'll see. Remember that I did use the crumb string or the crumb tape on this particular block, and I like the look of it. So hey, there you go. If you have some crumb tape that you have lying around, hey, use it as a string and put it in a string block. See how it looks. And I like it. Well, there you have it, the diamond string block. Well, at least that's what I'm calling it. I hope you enjoy constructing your diamond string block. Now, before we go, we have one order of business to take care of, and that's the giveaway. And here is the giveaway for this block. What is it? Well, it's a project caddy. So I bought this maybe last year or a couple of months ago, and I thought I was going to use it because, well, I like to take projects with me maybe if I'm taking public transportation to go to work, or if I just have to wait in line for something. And so I thought about using this. You have slots here to hold all your accessories. You could put all the main materials of the project in the middle here. Then you have 4 more slots here where you could put scissors, whatever you need, the tools you need. And I thought, you know, I'll buy this and I'll see if I can use it. Yeah, that just never happened. It's actually been sitting here in my craft room. Now, if you're curious about this is actually called a handy caddy. I figured, you know what, I'm not going to use it. It's been almost a year since I purchased this, and I just never bothered to even use it. So why should I just keep it and deprive some other person of using it? So that's what the prize is for, or that's what the giveaway is for this video. Now, as usual, here's how you enter the giveaway. First, you have to be a member of the Treasure Heart Creations Facebook group. If you're not a member, link is in the description below. Let's get you signed up. Second, post a picture of your diamond string block. Or actually, let's expand this a little bit. If you got any kind of string block that you've done in the past or that you're working on, post a picture on there. And let's use the hashtag THCS3CDiamonds. All posts must be received by December 31st, 2023. That's right, New Year's Eve, people. And, well, that shouldn't be a hard deadline to remember. So let's get out our strings, let's get out our scraps, let's have some fun sewing. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoy making your diamond string block. And as always, let's all go out there and let's create something.